Hello and welcome to COS Today, as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Today's Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome to Convention of States Today. This is episode number 323, and this is the November Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. Up there in the top right corner of your screen, you see a QR code, and I'm going to ask our Indiana State Communications Coordinator, Ken Kashuba, to talk about that for a moment. Would you, Ken?
Yeah, sure, John. That QR code there is a support code QR code. It is for, the one that Gary's pointing to, because I can't reach it from where I'm sitting. But that QR code is a support code. Basically, if you shoot that with your smartphone, and you'll see a place to put in your name and an email address, and you'll get access to our support platform, where you'll be able to find lots of previous contributor segments and a whole platform of people that support us, where you can input your questions, comments, or even suggestions for what you'd like to see us on future programming. So take advantage of that QR code. We don't ask for any donations. It's strictly volunteer, and it just shows the program that we have supporters out there, and we look forward to hearing from you.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. And I hope a lot of our viewers and listeners will follow that QR code and sign up as a supporter. Well, our topic for this roundtable is reducing crime in cities. That's an important aspect, and the bigger the city, the bigger the problem it is, it seems like. So it's an important topic, and I'm going to ask our regular COS Today host, Dale Parrish, to talk about why and how crime became the problem that it is in our cities. Dale?
Okay, John, I sure will. I want to bring up a PowerPoint that I put together for this. And let's see if I can get it on full screen. There we go. All right. Crime in the cities. An overview here. Today I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you said something, John.
Nope.
Okay. Today we're going to be taking a look at why crime became such a major concern in America's cities. We'll walk through the long-term trends, the shifts that we've seen in the past few years, and the role that immigration, both legal and illegal, have played over time. Finally, we'll discuss the impact of the recent migrant influx during the Biden administration and why cities are now facing new pressures that go beyond traditional criminal trends. Why crime grew in major cities. To understand today's situation, we need to go back several decades. Crime in large cities didn't spike overnight. A mix of factors gradually weakened public safety. These include the decline of proactive policing, the rise of progressive prosecutors who reduced penalties for repeat offenders, expanding drug and mental health crises, and political decisions that limited law enforcement capacity. Over time, these policies created an environment where offenders faced fewer consequences and criminal activity became more frequent and more visible. Let me get to my next slide here. Some recent trends. From 2020 through 2024, major cities saw significant increases in violent crime, property crime, retail theft, and carjackings. The pandemic accelerated pre-existing weaknesses in policing and prosecution. Court systems slowed down, jails reduced populations, and many cities adopted policies that deprioritized certain crimes. Even as some crime categories have stabilized more recently, the public perception and reality remains. Our urban centers feel less safe, more chaotic, and less governed than in years past. Long term, immigration, a relationship to crime, is complicated. Historically, the majority of immigrants, legal or illegal, are not violent criminals. Now, I underscore that historically, okay? But illegal immigration contributes to crime in specific and well-documented ways. Criminal cartels rely on illegal immigration for trafficking, smuggling, and drug movement. Some illegal immigrants do commit violent crimes, property crimes, or identity-related offenses. Additionally, sanctuary city policies, underscore that, sanctuary city policies created pockets where individuals with criminal records could avoid deportation, contributing to repeat offender problems in certain metro areas. So while immigration is not the primary driver of crime, it is a contributing factor in key categories. Well, let's talk about the Biden area influx. The Biden years saw the largest migrant influx in U.S. history. Record border encounters, mass parole releases, and overwhelmed immigration courts. Cities such as New York, Chicago, Denver, and Boston were not prepared for the humanitarian surge. Shelters filled, school systems absorbed thousands of students, and city budgets were pushed to the breaking point. While most immigrants are not violent criminals, the sheer volume has led to high-profile crimes and increased disorder. More important, cities now face resource shortages that make overall public safety harder to maintain. Public safety concerns. The core concern is not that every migrant brings crime. It's that cities already struggling with homelessness, drug addiction, and insufficient policing, now must absorb hundreds of thousands of new arrivals. Police resources are diverted to migrant centers. Social service agencies are overwhelmed. Local governments face budget deficits. This creates conditions where crime, whether committed by long-term residents or recent arrivals, becomes harder to control. The public sees the results every day: increased street disorder, theft, open-air drug use, and unpredictable public spaces. So, what's the key takeaways here? 3 main points. First, the roots of the crime crisis go back years and predate recent immigration surges. Second, while most immigrants are not criminals, the extraordinary scale of the influx has put enormous pressures on cities. You know, we say that they're not criminals, although they entered our country illegally. I'm kind of question that one. But And third, both strong border control and strong local policing are necessary. If we want to restore public order, neither issue can be ignored. So that's basically it, John. There's a couple items. Let me get myself back on the screen here. Couple items that I wanted to point out here is a lot of the data and so forth that's available to us on this topic. I think it's questionable whether it's accurate and whether it's really up to date. We've already found where certain cities have, refused to report certain activities related to illegal immigrant crime. So I don't know. Some of this information I think is questionable, and obviously, the sanctuary cities are the ones that are really contributing to, I think, our crime crisis in this country. So that's how I see it.
Well, thanks, Dale. That gives us an overview, the big picture of how crime in the cities increased for a while, decreased for a while, and now it's been surging for a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take the next topic. I'm going to be a host on my own, a guest on my own program. And I want to talk about, again, an overview picture of crime in D.C., the capital, Washington, D.C. Now, the homicide rate in D.C. was reported at 27.3 per 100,000 residents back last year, 2024. It was one of the highest in the nation, ranking 4th overall. Carjackings in DC, these have seen a dramatic increase with a 547% rise from 2018 to 2023, indicating a continued threat in carjackings in DC. How about motor vehicle theft? Washington has a vehicle theft rate that is 3 times the national average, contributing to its perception as one of the most dangerous urban areas in our country. So far in 2025, nearly 1,600 violent crimes have been reported, including about 100 homicides. Now that's a lot. Okay, so President Trump ordered the National Guard to Washington, D.C. on August the 11th this year. He declared a crime emergency in the capital, what I think is probably the most important city in the world, Washington, D.C. Now, Trump's deployment of National Guard was part of the administration's efforts to support law enforcement and to address crime in the area. Under his executive order, the Metropolitan Police Department has been and is being supplemented by personnel from several federal agencies, including the Border Patrol, the FBI, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, and the United States Park Police. In response to rising crime, particularly in high crime neighborhoods, federal troops and the National Guard have been deployed. These deployments have been concentrated in areas, they haven't been all over the city, but they're concentrated in areas that have shown significantly higher crime rates compared to the average in the city of DC. And guess what? There have been mixed responses from that community. Some businesses are reportedly closed down because of fears of public safety. But other businesses feel that increased law enforcement presence is beneficial for neighborhood safety. So you find people on both sides of the issue. Some like it, some don't. The federal agencies that I've named have played a significant role in Washington, D.C., particularly in responding to emergencies and enhancing security during times of unrest. They don't take care of the problem, but they act to support the local police department, helping to alleviate the strain on police resources and ensuring that they can respond more quickly to incidents in highly affected areas. One of the benefits of having federal agencies on the streets in Washington, D.C. has been deterrence. Just the visibility of federal agents can deter potential criminal activity. Think about it. I know when I'm driving down the interstate and I see a police car sitting there with a radar gun pointed at me, I look at my speedometer. And I've seen a lot of people ahead of me hit their brakes when they see a cop with radar. And I'm always amused at that. I think it's too late, buddy, to hit your brakes, because that cop caught you on radar half a mile back, you know. But anyway, when you see police, you change your behavior. In fact, a very interesting thing, I've been to the country of Trinidad and Tobago a number of times. Haven't been there lately while the Navy was performing exercises off the coast of, what is it? Venezuela. Yeah. I've seen Venezuela. If you go to the far western tip of Trinidad, you can see a little bit of land way out there on the horizon. So I've seen Venezuela, but never been there. But anyway, during my visits to Trinidad with a good friend that I have there, I noticed that every time a police car moves, it puts on its lights. And I commented on that. I said to my friend Kelvin, I said, is that police car chasing somebody? Why are the lights on? He said, no, it's the law here. Every time a police car moves, they want it to be highly visible. And so they're required to turn on that light on the top of the car. And I here's, as an American, that seemed pretty strange to me. We don't have that here. But he says when people see police cars, they change their behavior. And so just the presence of federal troops and FBI and DEA and U.S. Park Police lends towards deterrence to crime in the streets of Washington, D.C. Another result of the presence of federal agencies has been resource support. These federal agencies assist local law enforcement with resources and manpower, especially during crises. Now, violent crime in D.C. has decreased significantly, and it has recently reached the lowest level in 30 years. This includes, number one, homicides down by 32%. Number two, robberies down 39%. Number three, armed carjackings down 53%. That's a whopping change. And fourth, assaults with dangerous weapons down 27%. That's a remarkable difference. But the times, they are a-changin'. Just 4 days ago, on November the 20th, a federal judge halted the deployment of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. Her name is Gia Cobb, spelled J-I-A. I think that's how you would pronounce that. Jaya, whatever. She's the U.S. District Judge. She was appointed by Joe Biden. She temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deploying National Guard troops to enforce the law in the nation's capital without prior approval from the mayor. She has paused her ruling until December the 11th to allow the Trump administration time to appeal. So the National Guard and federal troops are all still there, but there's a temporary pause until December 11th. I would predict that Judge Cobb's ruling might be overturned. Now, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has expressed satisfaction with the judge's rulings. She stated that the ruling is a step in the right direction, emphasizing concerns about the use of the National Guard for policing without local consent. But we know that if federal agencies are in any city or any state enforcing federal law, local officials cannot stop it. Back to Bowser, Mayor Bowser. She believes that the National Guard's presence does not enhance safety and may create confusion among residents, especially among the criminal residents. They might be confused. Why can't I break the law anymore? Why are these guys here breathing down my neck. And so that's a rough overview of the story of crime in our nation's capital. Now I'm going to turn to our, I see a hand from Dale. Yes, sir.
Yeah, John, I have a question. This pertains to DC and it actually pertains to the next topic when Gary talks about Chicago. Why do we? Is it just me, or do we hear much more reporting on the crime going on rather than reporting on the crime going down? Why are we not? We see talking heads all the time complaining about the federal troops, the troops and this and that Trump's doing this and it's terrible and all that. But where are the people that's saying that they're welcoming this, that they approve of what's being done? Am I just not missing it? Am I missing it, or is there a slant in the reporting on this?
I don't have an answer to that. I've noticed the same thing. There is one major city that we don't have time to talk about tonight. I think it might be, is it Memphis, Tennessee, that invited federal troops. Right. And I haven't heard any bad mouthing from there. So maybe that's the other one. But these other major cities, their mayors know how to get on the TV, and so maybe that's why we hear so much from them. I don't know.
I've yet to hear reports from people on the street from Chicago, thanking for the presence of the National Guard and so forth. So I'm anxious to see if I'm setting Gary up here. I know, but I'm anxious to hear what he might have to say on this. But this is something that I thought was very interesting as to how, once again, the role that the media is playing in this whole issue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty important. Well, you gave us a perfect segue into Gary. Gary Harbaugh is a member of the Indiana team, as it says there. And Gary's going to talk about crime in Chi-Town, Chicago.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. I don't know why you guys are making such a big deal about Chicago, because the statistics clearly show crime has gone down for the last several years in Chicago. And I think one of the questions Dale asked early on is, why would this be? Well, let's talk about that. So, in fact, Dale mentioned this, that in 2020, 2021, during COVID in Chicago, there was a big jump in violent crime on the order of 30%, maybe even higher than that. For a couple of years there, big jump. And so since 2021, it has been trending down somewhat, but it was trending down now in the last couple of years from a very elevated rate, higher than it had been in any of the 5 years before. So that's one thing. Another thing about 2020 that I think we don't want to forget, and you kind of touched on this topic of, gee, what we hear in the news. Well, a great deal of what we hear in the news, I believe, is what we hear, what some people want us to hear, things people want us to have a great deal of focus on. So if we go back to the year February of 2012, that's been a few years ago, you guys may remember one of the things that happened in February 2012 was a young man named Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, was shot by a guy who was kind of neighborhood patrol kind of thing. And there was a great deal of media attention on that, a great deal of focus on that. But if we look nationally, statistically, there wasn't much of a change in crime that year. About 2.5 years later, Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Missouri. And again, there was, I think, in many ways, a very much of an engineered crime wave that came out of that, dramatically affected Ferguson, Missouri, and some of those areas. Didn't really affect the national crime statistics. But let's go a few years later to May of 2020, and you'll recall in Minneapolis, Minnesota, George Floyd died in police custody, and it was videotaped. And this became an explosive national story. And there was, I would argue, in part from COVID, but in part from this thing with George Floyd, that there was an engineered nationwide surge in violent crime. You remember cities burning, a lot of people were murdered. It was a huge jump in crime. So, how much of the crime wave of 2020 came because of the COVID lockdowns, and how much came from the George Floyd and the aftermath of that? We don't really know. A few months later, Jacob Blake was shot in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And again, there was a lot of violent response to that. And so one of the things you see is that crime can vary a lot from one year to another. In Chicago in 2020 and 2021 was the highest year on record, I believe, for homicides in Chicago. And it has trended down a little bit since then. Now, I'm not an expert sociologist, and even if I was, it wouldn't matter because it would be speculation. But one of the things that my kind of speculation says, maybe when Joe Biden first came into office and they opened the doors for waves of illegal immigrants to come in, maybe those first waves of illegal immigrants were a lot of violent criminals that came in. And later on, when millions more came in, maybe the additional millions were more people looking for economic opportunity and, the welfare free rides you get in America. And so, like in Chicago, statistically, they can say, more immigrants meant less crime. Well, I think you have to dig deep to really know what's going on. But clearly, the statistics show that 2020 and 2021, and even 2022, were very bad years for violent crime in Chicago. And whether that's really, you can tie that to immigrants or not, I don't know. We know there have been many horrific crimes created by illegal immigrants. And there have even been many, innocent people killed by drunk drivers who were illegal immigrants. And so we can't necessarily say, well, all this crime is caused solely by illegal immigrants. But we know that there's been a great deal of very devastating, serious crime that has been created and committed by illegal immigrants. And how much more that is, people are not caught, we don't know. So illegal immigration on net is a very big negative, and it's, I think, had a big negative effect on Chicago. And I think that the mayor can, make arguments statistically that it's going down because it's getting better than it was at its worst, but it's still well above where it was in the period before 2020.
Sounded like a period on the end of your sentence there, Gary.
That was a period.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a little break now from the panel and hear from one of my favorite COS pundits, David Allen Punt. He is a pundit. Catch the play on words there. This is called Dave's Daily Dose. Let's hear from David Allen Punt.
The condition of our cities, the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning? Is there a middle stage, an end stage, something in between and betwixt? A John Stossel piece on Facebook may offer a clue, and it has to do with ancient Rome. It was the center of the universe and the known world at one time. Then it dissolved. This is Dave's Daily Dose on BrokenRoadRadio.com. I'm David Allen Punt. I sit on the edge of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The signs around the city say the population is just over 300,000, but it has to be more than that. I remember snapping a picture of a new skyscraper in mid-construction. In the foreground of the shot are empty city blocks, weed-filled bits of trash, contrasting against the shiny, gleaming IDS tower that dominates the background. Off to its right, the Fauché Tower, now an ancient midget. I snapped my fingers a few times and the city's heart changed, grew up, exploded really. Busy, bustling, no parking spaces to be had. A nearby saloon district in downtown Shadow, still housing the old watering holes where Dad would stop for a shot and a beer on his way home from the Grain Belt Brewery. 2 more snaps of the fingers and Grain Belt is gone, but the bars are still there. Now we see flashing cop cars in the area every night on TV. There's an element of dementia there, a personality change, and not a good one. Mom used to quilt, but as the disease took hold, she stopped, but still kept buying bargain material. When it came time to move to assisted living, I hauled 63 garbage bags of quilt blocks out of the little house on the corner. Winding paths led to the sewing machine in my old bedroom through piles of material. Men no longer worked at Grain Belt because it closed, but they still stopped for a shot and a beer. Johann Norberg was talking to Stossel about his new book, Peak Human, about the high point of Rome and how sometimes it looked like the old IDS Tower, in my mind. Norberg said the most important element that brought Rome down was entitlement spending. Bread and circuses, handing out free stuff. At first to people temporarily down on their luck, who then became dependent, and the numbers swelled. Why work at Grain Belt or in the IDS Tower? Today's industry seems to revolve around scamming government programs, dividing the city into ethnic conclaves, replacing cops with social workers, unarmed social workers. Are they going to be able to stop the invasion of the barbarian hordes? Where are modern cities on the Roman scale? Somewhere between handing out lots of bread, but not yet furnishing free Vikings football tickets. Maybe someday, U.S. Bank Stadium will feature armed hand-to-hand combat to the death. The mayor having the final say with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Time to move. I'm David Allen Punt.
Time to move, huh? Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate that. And friends, you just saw a black screen there because this is just an audio production. There's no video to it, so nothing went wrong. That's just the way it is. There's nothing to look at, just something good to listen to. Yeah. I been to Minneapolis many times, and it was a beautiful city. I hate to try to characterize it now. Things have changed. Well, now Ken Whaley is our COS guy from Idaho. He's the state communications director there. And I'm going to invite him now to talk about why ICE, in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has constitutional authority to go into the American cities. Ken?
Thank you for that lead in, sir. And I appreciate everybody for letting me be here this evening. Several things that I was going to talk about tonight, you guys have touched on. So this should kind of pull all this together and wrap it up fairly nicely. But I wanted to start basically by stating that when we talk about ICE stepping into the sanctuary jurisdictions, a lot of people, of course, picture federal agents showing up uninvited, doing whatever they want, storming into towns like some kind of an occupying force. And of course, honestly, that imagery is pushed by the media on purpose. It's dramatic, scares people, and it feeds political narrative. And I won't get off track because several things that we've talked about earlier with regards to the media, I have a lot to say about having some experience with them, but I managed to keep my tongue, Dale. So we'll move on from there. But the real truth, or the truth to me, is that really it's a whole lot simpler than that, because ICE is not doing anything extraordinary here. They're doing exactly what the Constitution, Congress, and decades of federal law require them to do. So I wanted to break that down in a way that makes sense and hopefully cut through a lot of that media noise that seems to be a little bit of a background of everything that was talked about tonight. First off, immigration enforcement is a federal power. It's one of the enumerated powers. There's only, I believe it was 18. I could be wrong on that number, but I believe 18 enumerated powers. So under the Constitution, immigration isn't a shared responsibility. It's something states can opt into or out of, or cannot opt into or out of, I'm sorry, like they're choosing the gym membership. Doesn't work that way at all. So the founders gave Congress, not the states or the cities, the authority over naturalization, immigration rules, and management of the border. and the supremacy clause, which makes something else very clear. When federal law and local policy conflict, federal law wins. And again, that was a point that was touched on earlier as well. So when cities like New York or Chicago declare themselves a sanctuary city, what they're doing really is not changing the law. They're just announcing that they don't want to cooperate with it, which, well, and actually they are allowed to not cooperate. That's the 10th Amendment, where I term it anti-commandeering doctrine. I believe that's the federal government basically saying that the federal government can't force a city police chief to do ICE's job, or anybody else within that city for that matter. But here's the important part, the way I understand it. Local refusal does not and cannot block federal agents from enforcing federal law. ICE doesn't need permission from a governor or a mayor to enforce federal statutes inside a mayor's or governor state, mayor city, right? Second, ICE's authority isn't vague. I mean, these local mayors keep carrying on about, oh, it's not really right. It's this. No, it's very much written in black and white. The laws Congress has passed, especially a specific one that I found, 8 USC 1357, for those who may want to look it up, give federal immigration officers the power to question people about immigration status, make arrests based on illegal presence, execute warrants based on federal warrants, obviously, and conduct operations anywhere in the country, sanctuary, city, state, county, whatever it is that you want to term that as. So that includes Chicago, Seattle, New York. Even if every politician in those jurisdictions is screaming that they oppose ICE's presence, really doesn't matter. We see a lot of federal judges pushing back on those things, but I don't want to get too far off track. That's a natural speed bump is kind of how I see Trump approaching that. But that said, third aspect of this is Trump's executive orders didn't create any new powers. They basically just activated existing ones. Trump signed Executive Order 14287, I hope I got the number correct, earlier this year. And really all he did was put a spotlight back on the tools that the federal government already had and that had been basically being ignored during the Biden years. Okay. So this executive order propelled DOJ to identify jurisdictions that blocked federal enforcement, demand written explanations of policy changes and why they were blocking federal endorsement, and then basically warned that persistent refusal by the sanctuary jurisdictions could lead to consequences, lawsuits, funding fights, even more pressure from Washington, D.C. I have to do a little side note here. Personally, I'm a state rights guy. Convention of States is all about states' rights and limited federal authority. But in this case, federal authority absolutely trumps state authority. Everything I find points to that very significantly. So then basically President Trump directed DHS and ICE to do something that to me was pretty much common sense. If local authorities won't cooperate, go get the offender out in the community because the job still has to be done. These are dangerous criminals. Now, without going into the crime rates or anything along those lines, certain individuals are well known, either because of history from their country they immigrated from, legally or otherwise, or because of crimes they have committed once they came into the United States, sometimes both. But long story short, job still has to be done. So it's not ideal, and nobody prefers, I'll call them at-large operations over safe jail transfers, but sanctuary policies have taken the safe option off the table for ICE. And in essence, Trump's order simply said, ICE, go enforce the law. Don't back down just because some governor or mayor doesn't like it. The law is law from a federal perspective. So next point. DHS and ICE are doing what sanctuary cities force them to do on the point about going out into the community. Because I really want to be honest about this. ICE would much rather operate inside the jails and gather up these violent, extreme immigrants, as it were. It's safer for the agents. It's safer for the public. It avoids all the collateral arrests that everybody is up in arms about, and it avoids scenes that the media really loves to exploit. And let's face it, they do. They show those and they just go nuts on that stuff. But bottom line is, when a jail refuses ICE detainers, they release offenders without notification, they hide information, or blocks the jail access, the federal government has two choices. They can let that person go, the offender go, or go into the neighborhood and find them. Well, let's face it, if a federal government chooses option one and lets those people go, if they look the other way, we really don't have federal law anymore. We have federal suggestions, right? For lack of a better way to put that. So ICE obviously is choosing option two. That's their job. And constitutionally, they don't need anyone's permission to do it. Okay. They have every right to be there. Well, sorry, getting ahead of myself. So the other point I wanted to make was that the ICE being in all the cities throughout the country, blue jurisdiction or not, it really isn't a power grab. It's federal law restoring national standards. Sanctuary cities love to frame themselves as protecting freedom or protecting local communities. What they're really doing, in my mind at least, is trying to create local immigration policies that override federal ones. And that just can't happen under the Constitution. Federal law supersedes local law, state law, whichever aspect you want to put that under. So in essence, Trump orders, backed by DHS, ICE, and DOJ, simply restoring the structure the founders laid out. Federal government sets immigration law. That's just the bottom line on that. Federal agents enforce immigration law, and sanctuary cities don't get to nullify federal statutes. Very simple. I did want to touch on something real quick here. In essence, what they're trying to do is what's called nullification. Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't work in the 1800s, certainly isn't going to work now. And I wanted to very quickly kind of expand on that point a bit. In the 1830s, South Carolina tried to nullify federal law. Long involved cases. I won't delve that deep into it here, obviously limited on time, but it failed. And the Supreme Court of the era made that very clear in several major cases, one called McCullough versus Maryland, and the other one, I'm going to draw a blank now, Abelman versus Booth. These cases and others boil down to one key fact. States can refuse to help, but they can't block federal law. Not then and not now. I mean, it's just really that simple. So I wanted to wrap on a couple of quick points. Sanctuary policies don't stop ICE. They just make ICE's job harder, more dangerous, and more disruptive. And pretending that ICE needs permission to enforce federal law inside an American city, everything I found pointed to that being absolute falsehood. So I also needed to enhance the fact that Trump isn't sending ICE into sanctuary cities. ICE is already there. Federal law puts them there. We've got federal law enforcement in every city in this country already. All Trump has really done is tell them, ICE that is, do your job, do it fully, do it everywhere, and don't let politics get in the way of federal law. And that, whether sanctuary city politicians like it or not, is completely constitutional based on everything I could find. I know there are a number of judges that disagree with that, and I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, but everything I could find pointed to the fact that what they're doing is completely constitutional and legal.
Thank you very much, Ken. Yes, sir, Dale.
Can local law enforcement enforce federal law?
Only if they, to my understanding, want to qualify, only if they are trained and certified to do so. I understand that ICE has been doing that in, shall we call it, non-sanctuary jurisdictions. They're going in, working with local police, whether CHP, I'm sorry, that's California State Patrol or local police, and basically training them to enforce federal law and then certifying for that. If they get that certification, they can then work as federal officers. I'm not sure I'm saying that quite right, but basically they have the ability to go and actually enforce federal law. Usually they're supported by ICE in order to do that, though.
That's very interesting to me, as I wasn't aware of that. That question just came to my mind as you were making your presentation. That I know they. This is a federal government thing. It's one of the enumerated powers and blah blah blah. But I just wondered, can local law enforcement affect federal law? And so you're saying if they're certified, they need to have the certification to do that. So that option appears to be there. You don't hear much about that, though, do you?
Very, very little. I had to dig for that one a bit, and I decided not to go down that little rabbit hole for this particular presentation
Yeah.
because that's its own topic altogether. And obviously in, shall we call them blue or sanctuary jurisdictions, whether city, state, county, they are not accepting that certification. And I'm not even sure that's the right term. I believe that's correct. Whereas in more conservative or red states, absolutely they are. That gives them the ability to ask about immigration status, ask for legal papers, so on and so forth, which normally local law enforcement doesn't have the right to do.
Maybe we ought to talk about that on COS Today sometime, because I'd throw that out, John, as one of the long-term solutions that we're going to get into as a panel discussion on our next topic here. But just interesting. All right, thanks, Ken.
Yeah, well, let's go around that corner. Let's turn that corner, and I want to go around the round table here and talk about some potential long-term solutions. Now, this is a round table, despite the fact that each one of us is in a rectangle. I wish that our software would allow us to put everybody in a circle and then put those circles in a big circle so that we look like a round table. Ken, Ken Kashuba, work on that for us, will you?
I'll go right to it, John. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go around the screen as it appears here on my computer, and Dale started us on it. So I want to go to Ken Kashuba next and ask, do you have any suggestion about a possible long-term solution for this problem?
Long-term solutions? Well, Ken W did such a great job of outlining, how basically, and again, this is something that we've seen a pattern of over I think decades at this point, is the fact that there's a group of people, and especially in these blue cities, these sanctuary cities, that create the problem, and then don't really have a solution to it, but they love to create the problem and then blame that problem on the other side that they want to get rid of. So it all falls into this resist situation, which we've heard so much about. Everything is resist. And they never, I mean, that basically eliminates any solution for the American people. It only benefits their narrative as to what they want to push. And that all, again, comes back to putting themselves back in power. So I guess the solution that I'm seeing kind of ties in with our Convention of States. Our convention that we are working towards and working for would certainly take away some of the things that again become problematic for us. And even though at this point we are looking at financial and term limits and those type of things which are addressing our federal government, I think the problem on a long-term situation is this could be another point that could be added to a convention, whereby we basically say, hey, this is the Constitution, and this is not a democracy. We are a republic. And I think I see that so many times in everything that these people are saying. They cry democracy. They cry where the democracy is being torn down, but we live in a republic. So I think it's one of those things where as obviously we're addressing sanctuary cities here and the blue cities that are causing a good bit of this problem. I think it is something that we could address that way as far as a long-term situation is concerned. I don't know whether there's anything really short-term other than to let this play out a little bit. And obviously, I think Ken said it so well, basically everything that they're doing to dump these people back out in the streets and make the job harder for ICE and clarifying the fact that they are already there, points out the fact that these people turn around and point at the administration and our president sitting there in the Oval Office and saying, "Oh, it's all him." This looks like Germany, like Nazi, like the Nazi. Let me see your papers type thing. So I think I don't have anything short term, but I see this falling into something that we're already part of as far as a long-term solution.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ken. Something that really puzzles me. I've seen the statistics, and I know that President Obama was dubbed the deporter in chief because he deported more quietly in his 8 years in the Oval Office than Trump has in his almost 5 years now. And Trump only has 3 more years. How in the world is he going to catch and surpass the deportations? But we're not talking about that tonight. We're talking about crime. But anyway, that came to mind, and I thought, well, I do not understand that. How did Obama get away with that? Just very quietly, So let's go to Gary. Gary, do you have a suggestion for a long-term solution to crime in the cities?
I think the only thing that can really change the crime problem is becoming more of a culture of self-governance, a culture of people who respect the law and respect their neighbors.
Yeah.
And so you have more of a culture of people who want to be independent and self-governing, as opposed to a culture of people who want to be dependent on Big Brother and, obey the rules of Big Brother and get the goodies from Big Brother. And that's a big challenge. And I don't have the solution in my pocket, or I'd pull it out and hand it to you. But anyway, that's what I see has got to change, and it's going to take a long time to get to really change the culture.
Well, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, cultures do change, but it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of personal experiences that lead towards that, and communication. When you hear somebody else's story, it starts to change your outlook on things, and slowly the culture changes. And I tend to think that maybe the pendulum has begun to swing in the other direction. And I know from my limited study of history, the pendulum swings back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen a turn, and I certainly hope so. Well, Ken Whaley, do you have an idea for a long-term solution?
A couple of points, actually. Imagine that. One, I agree with you about the pendulum. As far as I'm concerned, absolutely starting to swing back forth. I think it's very visible. We'll just call it good at that. I'm going to break a little bit outside the whole idea of crime in sanctuary cities and go a little bit bigger with that. Because I think there was a reason all these folks were imported, shall we say, specifically under the Biden administration, to help change the political landscape. Okay. Because whether people want to say it didn't happen or not, a lot of these guys were registered, and then they would go to another town somewhere and sign up for benefits there, and they were re-registered again. There's no federal database that follows registration for voting, qualify that, between different states. At least none that I found. If I'm wrong on that, please somebody correct me, but I believe that's the case. It's up to each individual state. So I can go from, well, not me, an immigrant can come into Texas, get signed up for benefits, get a free bus ride or a plane to Chicago, and go from one place to the other and re-register in another state. And then, of course, with mail-in ballots, et cetera, that allows them to, other people, I should say, to use that name and those addresses to put forth false votes, qualify it that way. So to me, there was a big reason for the underlying let's open the borders and let them in. I think it's backfired on them. But long story short, I think personally that was a big part of that, was to change the political landscape. When you think about how the percentage of people that actually vote, even for president in this country, it's relatively low. You know, I mean, I know for local county and state vote numbers, 20-30% is a huge number. And in a county like mine, where there's about 4,900 people, when an extra couple hundred people don't vote, huge thing. Or extra couple hundred do vote, even though they shouldn't necessarily be. So to wrap that up, Trump's pushing currently for going to paper ballots again, same day voting. All, you know, there's a whole line of things there that he wants to do. Personally, I'm absolutely in favor of that. And I think that alone would then reduce a lot of the number of people in this country, because one, they quit getting the benefits, and two, you know, they are no longer useful to the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me put my 2 cents in here about a possible long-term solution. And it starts with something that I heard my county historian say last Thursday night. I went to a talk that he gave on the conditions and causes of the American Revolution. It's part of the America 250 celebration. We're heading up to our 250th anniversary, July 4th, 2026. This country is going to be 200.5 years old, America 250. Anyway, after he spent about 40 minutes talking about the causes of the American Revolution, he wrapped up his talk by saying he's the county historian. He's in his 70s, and he is a professional historian. He's won awards for it and so on. And he said that he believes we're at a crossroads, and that we need a return to prayer and patriotism. Those 2 things. A historian. We need a return to prayer and patriotism, love of your country, and a return to prayer. And so that opens the door for my thought that this country really needs a moral and spiritual renewal, revival. We need a return of ethics. We need a return of family values, where and here I'm going to sound a little bit like the late Charlie Kirk, where men resume their role as moral and spiritual leaders in the family. And here, you know, I partly fault the federal government and the welfare state for the destruction of poor families, requiring that in order to get a welfare check, the father has to be absent. So what did millions of fathers do? They left. They're not fulfilling their fatherhood obligations. They're not raising their children. And millions of kids have been growing up in this country without a respectable and responsible male role model. And so I could go on for a half hour, but I don't want our audience to tune out. Let me just wrap it up by saying a moral and spiritual revival. And there's nothing we can do to legislate that. We just have to work and pray and trust the good Lord for the outcome. Well, I want to turn to our good little friend, Marengo Mike. He has a reminder that he wants to give to us. So, Marengo, let's hear from you.
Rango Mike here, asking you to hit that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so you'll be reminded every time we go live. We really do appreciate your support. Now, back to our program.
I like that cute little guy. Well, this brings us to the end of this month's roundtable. Before we close it out, I want to give you our email address. If you have any questions at all about Convention of States, send them to us by email at that address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Our next COS Today will be a week from now, next Monday, December the 1st, when we'll look at Ben Franklin, number 5. Following that, December the 8th, where the topic will be gender identity. And the next week after that, I've lost count, is December the 15th, where going to talk about the Epstein files. They've been much in the news, and we're going to take a look at that in the next COS Today. And the next roundtable is going to be on December the 22nd. Now, that's Christmas week, and so we're not going to do a live one, but we're going to give you one of our best ever, okay? A golden oldie, a replay, a repeat. And now to close us out, here is Marengo Mike.
Marengo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.